guys, Jeremy Four Sons Off-Road. So just pulled a little Suzuki Carry. This is a DA63T, a 2003 model. Just pulled it into the shop and we're going to check the spark plugs. Now where do you even find the spark plugs on a mini truck? Well, on Suzuki models, it's under the left side seat, which is the passenger seat. That's the top side of the motor. So just pop up the passenger seat there and you're going to get access to your spark plugs right underneath. Now, oddly enough, not too difficult to find out what kind of spark plugs are supposed to be in there. A lot of times if you look on these little mini trucks, they will have little service plates and things like that. So this one does. This one shows us basically, you know, obviously we've got some Japanese there, but pretty easy to find the spark plugs. So this is a four-wheel drive manual transmission, so they are requesting an NGK DCP R7E, very common plug. We grabbed a set of those right from our local parts store. So yeah, basically we're ready to check out the old plugs, and we're going to replace them with brand new ones. Alright, so let's have a look at the tools we're going to need to get this job done, and there's not that many. So basically just a couple of smaller sockets, an 8mm, 10mm, and we've got a 1/4 inch ratchet with a short extension on there just to help out. And then we've got our 3/8 ratchet with a nice long extension, and a 5/8 spark plug socket. Really important again to grab that spark plug socket. If you use just a standard 5/8 socket, not only is it going to be really difficult to get the spark plug in and out of the spark plug hole, but you actually risk damaging the plug because the top of the plug won't be supported. If you get a little bit too much twist on there, you can actually snap the top of the spark plug off. And even though we're just checking the plugs, because they're so cheap, I mean, these spark plugs, these are for this specific application. It's an NGK DCP R7E plug. These are like $3 to $5 at any local parts store. So, I mean, we're definitely just going to replace those while we're already in there and start with some nice fresh ones. All right, so now that we're under the passenger side seat, looking at the top side of the motor, we're just going to get a couple of things ready here. So if your truck has the little jack handle hidden in there, I always recommend popping that out or dropping it down out of the way. That way it's not right in the middle of your access there. The spark plugs on this motor are accessed right underneath this top plastic cover. So really don't need to take anything else out of the way here. You can pop this little coolant line off so you can get access to the that bolt underneath there. So it's just these four 8mm bolts that you can pop out. I've already loosened these ones off, so you can just pull these off by hand pretty quickly. Alright, so we pop that off. Alright, so now what we're looking at are the ignition coils. So there are 3 separate ignition coils on the top of each cylinder. The coil is connected directly to the spark plug, so there are no spark plug wires. There's no distributor or anything like that on the older trucks. So it makes it quite easy to work on, and a little more reliable type of a system typically than having spark plug wires and things like that. These coils are simply held in place with a single 10mm bolt there. So we're just going to switch to our 10mm socket, and let's start right at the back here. So one thing to remember when working with these coils is to be careful with them. You don't want to drop them. You don't want to pull on any of the wires, you know, the wiring modules and connectors. Just be very careful that you don't damage them in any way, because they're not terribly expensive, but definitely not something that you would want to have to replace simply because you fumbled it and dropped it on your floor. Alright, so now that we've got these, it's not quite out yet. Now that we've got these 3 bolts out of the way, the coils should just pop off quite simply. So if you just get a little bit of a grip on there, underneath if you can, and yeah, they come out quite easily. Again, make sure you don't kink any of the cables. You can always have a look underneath as well, have a look inside, make sure that everything's nice and clean, there's no corrosion up inside where the spark plug actually goes into the coil. Everything looks good on that one. Let's pop this one out. Yeah, same thing, everything looks really good underneath there. Set that one aside. Pop that one out. So yeah, with this application we don't even need to physically unplug the coils. They came out pretty easily. So the spark plugs now are basically recessed down inside each of these little holes there. So now is when you take your extension. So remember, we've got our extension with our 5/8 spark plug wrench on there, and just gently reach down inside, feel around for that spark plug. Once you feel you've got a good grip on it there, just pop it out. The nice thing with an extension is once you've got it broken loose, you can get that ratchet out of the way and just turn it out by hand generally. Alright, and that's why you have a spark plug socket specifically, because when you pull it up out of that hole, it brings the spark plug with it. If you just had a standard 5/8 socket, it's not going to do that. So let's have a look at this spark plug. Now, spark plug looks in pretty decent shape. You can tell it's a little bit black. Now, black and a little bit wet. Now, that doesn't really concern me on this specific truck. You know, if it was black and sooty with a lot of buildup and oily, that could mean that you're actually burning oil. You could have, you know, bad cylinder rings or, you know, bad valve stem seal, something like that. This is just kind of wet and sooty. That's literally from the truck probably idling a little bit too much over the past, you know, couple of times. It hasn't really been operated for more than a few minutes at a time, so you might get that. I'll show you what your plugs should look like. So yeah, before you go and physically inspect your spark plugs, if you're changing them out, well, you can change them out anytime, but if you're going to inspect your spark plugs, it's always a good idea to go and run the vehicle up to operating temperature. Go for a good, decent drive with it. Don't do any excessive idling or you know, driving that you normally don't do. You know, let everything cool down, of course, but don't idle the vehicle. And then once you pull the spark plugs out, you generally get a good picture as to how they're burning. This is typically what a decent spark plug is going to look like after it's been running. You've got a nice, you know, kind of toasty brown color on there, no buildup or you know, any soot or signs of fouling. The plug's not wet at all. Oddly enough, even though this plug looks great, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. These plugs actually came out of a vehicle that was missing on idle and missing pretty heavily under load, like acceleration. Simply the spark plugs, pulled them out, they all look great. Hard to tell. Put a new set back in, completely eliminated the issue. So since we've got our plugs out, let's just check the gap just to make sure that we don't have any, you know, we take our little gap tool there. Now, we just want to see what this one was at since we pull it out here. And you just slide it in there, slide it over. Don't know if you can see that on the camera very well, but we're sitting at about 0.034, 035. This one does have the millimeters on the back side there, so that's about just about 0.9 of a millimeter, which is right in spec. These plugs, again, are supposed to be at 0.8 to 0.9 millimeters for the gap. So gap looks good on that one. Let's go to the next two. All right, so pop that one out, and just like the first one, black and a little bit wet again. So again, from excessive idling. Now again, that's not the only reason why your plugs might be black and wet. You know, if you have if the plug isn't actually firing at all, that could be another indication as to why, you know, it's wet, has a little bit of fuel on it. And again, we checked that one, gap's identical, so we're right in spec with that one. Let's pull that last one out and have a look. All right, pull that one out, and same as the others. Check the gap really quick, and identical, so good there. All right, so before we just go and throw our new plugs down inside there, You want to look down inside the holes just to make sure everything's good. So what you want to look for obviously is any major, if there's oil down in the spark plug hole, like actually where the spark plug would be, that can indicate that there's a leaky gasket, head gasket between the top of the cylinder head, the valve cover gasket basically. But looking inside, these ones are good. Don't know if the camera's going to get a good look at this one, but there we go. Everything's nice and clean. You don't want any grime, debris, anything in there, anything that could get inside that motor, but yeah, all looks pretty good. So we're going to pop those new plugs back in place. All right, so before we go and just pop our brand new plugs back into place, we've got to check the gap on these as well. Because, well, number one, you don't want to just take it for granted that they came, properly gapped right out of the box. And number two, you never know if it was bumped or something like that. The gap could close up because it's not that difficult to change that. But if we check it there, we're good, pretty much exact. So that plug's ready to go in. So again, pop the old plug out of there. Pretty important to have one of these, actual spark plug sockets, especially when trying to get these plugs back in. There's a little rubber holder in there that's going to hold that spark plug in place. Pretty important when you're trying to get it down into this hole. So just carefully put it back in there. Now be very careful that plug starts nice and smooth. You don't want to have the ratchet on there until you're actually tightening the plug on, because you don't want to cross thread that plug. It should go in really nice and clean, just like this one's going. We just snug it down by hand just so that we know it's seated. Then we're going to take our ratchet. Now because these plugs have, grab another one here out of the box, because these plugs have they do have this little metal squash gasket on there. So with that little gasket on there, once that plug is seated, you're just going to want to turn that plug about a half a turn. So we've got it fully seated there. So snug it up. Now we're just going to go a half turn. So we'll go a quarter and a half. That's it. Oh, now I lost my socket in there. Wiggle that loose. Well, that's something that can happen with these little spark plug wrenches. All right, well, since that happened, how do you suppose we're going to get that out of there now? Well, if it's really stuck in to the point where your wrench just will not pull that socket out, you might have to just physically unscrew the spark plug again, add a little bit of silicone lube to the socket itself. Otherwise, you can try to reach in there with something and pull it out if you have a longer set of needle nose pliers or something like that. So let's give that a try. Let's see if we can actually grab on anything there. There we go. Popped her out of place. So yeah, there's that little rubber, probably can't see it, but there's a little black rubber piece in there that holds onto the spark plug. Obviously a little bit sticky there. So let's add a drop of lube to that. All right, so in we go with spark plug number 2. Again, check the gap before we just stick it in there. Now again, I'm just going to put it in just with the extension. Again, be very careful not to cross thread these or to over tighten. If you strip out your, especially on a aluminum cylinder head, if you strip that spark plug hole out, you're not in for a pretty situation. Not only is it a difficult fix, it's not going to be a cheap one, but there's our half turn. Now let's see if that spark plug, yep, there we go, that little bit of lube just pops right out. And let's try that third one. Again, let's just check that gap. Ooh, go to the thinner side. So this one's a little bit tight, so a couple ways you can adjust that depending on the tool that you have. This one has the little thing here where you can just basically put that on now. Again, this isn't hard to do, so just a very slight adjustment, because we just want to open it up just a hair there. See, the tiniest little touch and we've gone way too far. So again, we can just push that back in a little bit. Just gently. All right, yeah, so when you're adjusting that gap, if you do have to close it up, you don't want to be banging the spark plug around or, you know, knocking it with any sort of hard tools. It could damage the electrode or damage the porcelain, you know, body of the plug. Not hard to damage these plugs. Even just dropping a spark plug on the ground a lot of times will damage it to the point where it's useless. So, but again, let's just put that third one back in. Again, we're just going to do our half turn, quarter, half. Oh, there you go. Our socket popped right back out. Easy as that. Now let's just replace these coils. It should just go in real nice and easy. Just pop right on top. And we just need to simply replace those 10 mil bolts that were holding them in place. Alright, so everything's just nice and hand tight. Just going to snug everything up here. You don't have to go too crazy. Alright, just double check that all of our connectors are securely in place. Wires are all good, nothing's kinked or busted. And then we can just go ahead and replace that top cover. 8 mil bolts. Alright, so pretty much as simple as that. We're just going to finish tightening those up, but yeah, I mean, if you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to check out all of our other videos. We've got over 50 videos now on these little mini trucks. Subscribe to our channel too, as we're always adding new ones, and don't forget to check out our website at foursonsoffroad.com.